On June 14th, 1969, a family hike in the Great Smoky Mountains ended in one of the most disturbing disappearances in American history. A 6-year-old boy vanished in broad daylight. There were no screams, no signs of struggle, and no trace of where he went. His name was Dennis Martin. More than half a century later, his disappearance remains unsolved and deeply unsettling. This is not a story of getting lost, this is a story of a child who simply vanished. The Martin family was visiting the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, one of the most visited and most unforgiving wilderness areas in the United States. Dennis was hiking with his father, grandfather, and several other adults near Spence Field, a high mountain clearing dense with forest on all sides. The children decided to play a simple prank. Dennis and another boy planned to hide behind a bush and jump out to scare the adults. The other child stepped out, but Dennis didn't. They assumed he was hiding, but minutes passed, then longer, and then when they began calling his name there was no answer. Within moments Dennis Martin was gone. The family searched the immediate area. They spread out, they shouted. Nothing. No footprints, disturbed foliage, no cries for help. Park rangers were alerted almost immediately. By nightfall, one of the largest search operations in US history was underway. Hundreds of volunteers, professional trackers, search dogs, military assistants, but from the very beginning something felt wrong. Dennis had wandered downhill. He hadn't followed the trail. Over the next several days the search intensified. Up to 1,400 people scoured the mountainside. Helicopters flew overhead, dogs' tracks scent only for it to vanish abruptly. Some trackers reported Dennis's scent simply stopping as if he'd been lifted from the ground. A man reported seeing something unusual that same afternoon. He claimed he saw a large, rough-looking man carrying what appeared to be a child over his shoulder. The figure moved quickly and naturally fast through dense terrain. This report was documented, but it was never fully explained. No suspect was ever identified, and there was no follow-up. A severe storm hit the area shortly after Dennis vanished. Heavy rain washed away potential evidence. The terrain around Spence Field is steep, forested, and filled with ravines. A 6-year-old child could not have travelled far in that time, not without leaving something behind. The mountains are loud, animals make noise, injured people cry out. Dennis did none of these things. The disappearance of Dennis Martin has become one of the most cornerstone cases in unexplained wilderness vanishings. It challenges assumptions, it raises uncomfortable questions, and it reminds us that even in daylight, even surrounded by people, someone can disappear without explanation. The mountains keep their secrets, and sometimes they never give them back. As the search for Dennis Martin expanded, investigators documented the detail that remained controversial. For decades, a witness reported seeing a large-looking rough man carrying what appeared to be a small child over his shoulder. The figure was described as unusually large, moving faster than expected and travelling through terrain that experienced hikers wouldn't even struggle to cross. This account was officially recorded but was never explained. Over time, researchers began to notice something unsettling. The description closely matched reports tied to the phenomenon long associated with the Appalachian region, commonly referred to as Bigfoot. The Great Smoky Mountains are not just vast, they are ancient. Long before national parks and hiking trails, local populations told stories of large, upright creatures inhabiting the forests. By the 1960s, reports of Bigfoot or wild men had already been documented across Tennessee, North Carolina, and the broader Appalachian range. These reports often shared common elements: large, broad-shouldered features, dark or matted hair, unnatural speed, and the ability to move silently through dense forest. In several cases, witnesses claimed these figures were seen carrying animals or something small in their arms. What makes the Dennis Martin case different is the timing. The sighting occurred the same day Dennis vanished, in the same general area during an active search window. This was not a story that surfaced years later, it was reported immediately. While none of this proves the involvement of an unknown creature, it has fueled decades of speculation, because if the witness was mistaken, then who or what was moving through that forest with such a speed? As hours turned into days, the search for Dennis Martin escalated beyond anything the park had ever seen. Local rangers quietly realised that this was not a typical lost child scenario. The terrain was too dense, the disappearance was too sudden, and the lack of evidence was deeply concerning. Within a short space of time, the Tennessee National Guard was called in to assist. This decision alone signalled how serious the situation had become. The National Guard is not typically activated for missing persons cases in national parks. Their involvement suggests officials feared one of three possibilities: that Dennis was critically injured as time was running out, that terrain itself posed an extreme danger, or that the situation involved circumstances beyond a routine disappearance. Yet even with military resources, the search produced nothing. The involvement of the National Guard is one of the most overlooked aspects of the Dennis Martin case, because it underscores one verified fact: authorities believed very early on that something was seriously wrong. This was not treated as a child simply wandering off a trail, it was treated as an emergency of an unknown case, and despite military support, the case went cold. When even the National Guard could not locate a 6-year-old child in daylight, it forces an uncomfortable question: what kind of situation leaves no trace at all? What comes next is not part of the official record. There are no documents, no reports, no confirmations, only a story that circulated quietly for decades, a story shared in fragments and always off the record. Some National Guard members later claimed during a night search operation, a small unit was sent off-grid deep into the forest than planned. According to the story, the men began noticing something strange. The forest had gone silent, no insects, no wind, no animal sounds. Then came movement, not ahead of them, but around them. The figures were described as tall, dark, and upright, not human. They did not rush, they did not approach, they simply stood at the edge of visibility, partially obscured by trees in the mist. Watching, the soldiers froze. Weapons were raised, but no orders were given, because no one could clearly explain what they were looking at. The account claims one figure stepped forward briefly, just enough to be seen: broad shoulders, unnatural height, and eyes reflecting light far higher than expected. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, the figures withdrew silently. No pursuit, no confrontation, only the feeling that the unit was no longer alone. According to the story, the search team was quietly redirected shortly afterward. No explanation, no debrief, just a change in orders. Seven years after Dennis Martin's disappearance, the Great Smoky Mountains would claim another name. This time it wasn't a child, it was a 16-year-old girl. Her name was Trenny Gibson. On October the 8th, 1976, Trenny set out with her school classmates from Burden High School for a school trip to the Great Smoky Mountains. She was last seen walking slightly behind the group along a trail near the park boundary. Witnesses said she lagged behind only briefly. Moments later she was gone. The response was immediate. Park rangers, law enforcement, volunteers. Once again, helicopters were deployed, dogs were brought in, and once again searchers encountered the same impossible problem: no trail. No signs of a fall, no indication of where she went, just like Dennis Martin. Shortly after Trenny disappeared, bad weather moved into the area. Cold rain, falling temperatures, limited visibility. As for the Dennis Martin case, the storm erased potential evidence. When discussing the disappearance of Trenny Gibson, one name occasionally resurfaces, not as an answer, but as a question. That name is Harold Bishop Jr. To be clear from the outset, Harold Bishop Jr. was not a missing person. He was a convicted killer, and he was a fugitive for years. There is no official evidence linking him to Trenny Gibson, but his name persists for one reason: opportunity. By the mid-1970s, Bishop had been on the run for over a decade. His whereabouts were unknown. Rumors placed him across multiple states, including regions connected by rural roads, forests, and the Appalachian Trail. At the time of Trenny Gibson vanishing, Bishop was still believed to be alive. The theory, purely speculative, suggests a narrow possibility that the fugitive, accustomed to avoiding people, might gravitate towards wilderness corridors and avoid populated areas altogether. In theory, such a person could pass unnoticed through regions like the Great Smoky Mountains, but theory is not evidence, and evidence is what the case lacks entirely. At the time Trenny Gibson vanished, Bishop had not been captured, and according to law enforcement intelligence circulating in the region, he was believed to be somewhere in or around the Appalachian Mountains, including parts of the Smokies. A known fugitive cannot fully explain what happened to Trenny Gibson. We are left with the same conclusion investigators reached decades ago. Something happened in those mountains, and the mountains kept it secret. What comes next is not supported by official records. There are no arrests, no reports, no evidence, only stories. Stories passed quietly through mountain towns, park employees, and long-time residents of the Appalachian Range. Stories about people who never came down from the mountains for generations. Locals have spoken about feral communities living deep in the Smokies, families who retreated into the wilderness decades ago. Some to escape the law, some to escape society, some because they had nowhere else to go. Over time, the stories say they became something else: isolated, territorial, and hostile to outsiders. According to those accounts, the people lived far off trail in abandoned cabins and caves and hand-built shelters by terrain and tree cover. They avoided contact, they moved silently, and they were said to have watched hikers long before hikers even knew they were there. After the disappearance of Trenny Gibson, some locals offered an explanation that law enforcement never pursued publicly, that she may have crossed into territory no one was meant to enter, and she may have been seen and taken. Not by an animal, not by a single man, but by people who had learned how to vanish as completely as the forest itself. After all the theories and after all the speculation, it's important to return to the one case that started it all: the disappearance of Dennis Martin. The core facts: Dennis disappeared near Spence Field in the Great Smoky Mountains. He was gone within minutes. Hundreds of people searched the area, and the National Guard was deployed. Military helicopters scanned the terrain. Professional trackers followed scent trails that simply stopped. Despite one of the most extensive searches in US history at the time, Nothing was ever found, and this raises serious questions. Why did trained tracking dogs lose their scent so abruptly? Why did experienced searchers report that the trail simply stopped? And why after more than 50 years has nothing ever surfaced? Not by accident, not by erosion, not by chance. If this was exposure, where is the evidence? And if this was an animal attack, why was nothing left behind? If this involved another person, how did it happen without a sound, without witnesses, without a trail? Every explanation leaves gaps, and those gaps matter.
No signs of foul play, no trace at all. It's like they just walked off the map.
I remember Dennis Martin, boy, disappeared near them caves back in '69. Ain't never been found.
You found me by the willow tree where the river tells no lies. I still had dirt beneath my nails and thunder in my eyes. You asked me what I buried there. I said just what I had to lose. But you kept staring through my words like you already knew. Don't look at me like that, like truth's a blade you've drawn, like I'm the ghost that haunts your sleep or the sin that won't move on. I've carried more than you could name, and I ain't turning back. So don't look at me like that. The lantern light was trembling, the night was sharp and still. You said my name like it could say what's long been left to kill. You reached to touch the cross I wear.